So Investigation with Dr. T was the brainchild of our dean, Dr. Kimberly Durham. She said, do you think that you could do some type of an ongoing podcast about criminal justice? And I said, yeah, of course, definitely. And so that's sort of how it all started. So I thought that this year, what I would do is sort of call it the empowerment season. I really want to highlight and validate these folks who have turned their lives around. For the last season, we had on folks like Gregory Boyle from Homeboy Industries. He's a Jesuit priest who runs the largest gang rehabilitation program in the country. Let's look at folks who have actually succeeded at Homeboy, for example, and have a homeboy and a homegirl come on the show and talk about their experiences being in a gang. What was that like? What attracted them to Homeboy? And how has their lives changed and turned around as a result of it? This is really awesome. Justice Restored, Life After Exoneration. And so I have an exoneree coming on, Willie McDonald. Willie was incarcerated wrongfully. I want to really zero in on what was that like for Willie. Dr. Barry Ryman, who is the clinical director at Recovery Unplugged, and Richie Supa, who is a former band member of Aerosmith. To have them both come on, talk about addiction, and talk about music. He's going to talk about how music as a modality can really be effective in helping addicts fight addiction. And of course, we're going to have student spotlight, former alum, etc., on some really cool and interesting topics. We are going to bring back Unfound Ed Denzel, most definitely. This season of empowerment, like the gangs, former gang members, former folks who are incarcerated, and folks who struggle with addiction. I think that those are just like really important for folks to hear, and our students to hear, and even our faculty to hear.
So we always like to just kind of let our guests and participants, attendees know that some uncomfortable things that you might hear tonight. So Dr. Nickie Jackson is president of the Willie T. Donald. So I've been saying your name wrong. I've been giving you maybe one of my production team members could change your last name. Timmy, I'm so sorry. I made you McDonald. I made you an Irishman. Anyway, Dr. Nickie Jackson is president of the Willie T. Donald Exoneration Advisory Coalition, which was created to support those who have been or will be wrongfully convicted in the state of Indiana. She's the faculty advisor to the Student PNW Criminal Justice Club. Her teaching areas include domestic violence, sexual assault, victimology, wrongful convictions, ethics, juvenile delinquency, school violence, criminology, minority issues in CJ, criminal law, and law enforcement. And Willie T., and the T stands for Timmy, Donald, otherwise known as Timmy, is an innocent man who spent 24 years in prison for crimes that he never committed. Shortly after Mr. Donald's release, he and Nickie, Allie Jackson, had an opportunity to meet. And as a result of that meeting, both of their lives forever changed. Together, they have formed a strong friendship and continue to advocate for exonerees with the support of the full advisory board. And so please help me welcome Willie, Timmy, Donald, as he comes to the panel here. And I'm going to also add spotlight for our dear Dr. Nickie Jackson. And so thank you to all three of you, really, not all three of you. Thank you to me for showing up. Thank you to both of you. What I wanted to just let people know is that Layla Horton and Justin Campbell, who were my students who worked for me last year, we had an occasion to go to Chicago to the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences conference, and it was an Alpha Phi Sigma meeting. And Layla and Justin were over the moon meeting Dr. Jackson. I mean, they couldn't stop gushing about, and they were so excited about meeting her who she was and what she stands for and what her work is about. And of course, they were such great little they were a great production team. Maybe I don't want to say not as great as my production team today and now, but similar, right? Love both of them very much. One of them graduated, the other has gone to another school. But anyway, thank you, Dr. Jackson, for saying yes to them and then saying yes to me and being here tonight. And I also know that you're not feeling well. And so I do appreciate that we didn't cancel. I do appreciate that you're going to try your best. But you let us know. We don't want to push you too hard. And Timmy, I want, this is really all about you, man. This is about you. I want to spotlight you. I want to focus on you. I want to hear from you, your story. I do believe that the personal is political. I can't remember actually who said that. Somebody in my all of my PhD in social work, it came out. It's a very feminist kind of perspective that the personal is political. The story of the survivor, the story of the person who's been injured, who's been disenfranchised, who's been marginalized, that's the story we want to tell. That's who we want to give voice to, power to, empowerment to. Dr. Jackson, did you want to say something, or do you want me to, I'll just have Timmy tell the story and then we can check in with you after he's done?
Whatever works. Sorry about my voice.
Okay.
But I'm losing. There I am.
Okay.
Whatever works for you guys. I think
Okay.
just just maybe start with asking Timmy some questions, and then
Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
jump in if I feel like I need to.
Okay. Very
Thank
good.
you.
Okay. Excellent. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove the spotlight for now. And I'm also going to remove my spotlight once I finish asking you the question. So Timmy, in your own words, really, tell us your experience. Tell us your story and what happened and whatever. I also know that there's some litigation involved, and so you have to be really careful what is said. This is live streamed onto YouTube and it's public. So we want to make sure that we're honoring that and respecting that for you. So whatever you feel comfortable sharing with us, we want to hear it. So take it away, Timmy. It's all you.
Okay. Thank you for having me, first of all.
Yes.
So everybody think my story began in 1992 when I was wrongly convicted for 2 robberies and a murder. But actually it began in 1998 when my childhood friends and myself wanted to go to a local hangout.
Timmy, it was 1989.
Yeah, 1989, I mean. Sorry. 1989, we wanted to go to a local hangout in Gary, Indiana. We wanted to go to the beach, so we didn't have a vehicle, so we decided to ask my friend's uncle, can we use his car? We was on our way to the beach and we got stopped by the police. The police thought the car was stolen. We was taken to the Gary police station. I was fingerprinted and my photo was taken. I asked the arresting officer, could I call my friend's uncle, and he'll let them know that the car wasn't stolen. He could bring the proper paperwork to show them the car is not stolen. And a couple of hours later, he did that. He brought the proper paperwork to show the car wasn't stolen. And when I was released. So fast forward to 1992, February 27, 1992. I just got paid. I made a couple of stops before I arrived home. And my sister and her fiance, they was leaving out the door. And I asked them where they was going. They told me they was going to look at some cars because my sister wanted a new car. So we went to a car dealership in Maryville, Indiana, south of Gary. My sister looked at some cars. Her and the car dealership, car salesman, they exchanged information. We left that car dealership. We went to another car dealership in Crown Point, Indiana, further south from Gary. My sister test drove some cars, a couple of cars. She exchanged information with the salesman, and we returned home about 10 o'clock that night. On this particular night, it was about 5 robberies and a murder happened in Glen Park section of Gary, Indiana. A young man named Bernard Jimenez was murdered during this crime spree. In March, I think it was March the 3rd, 1992, I was at home watching TV and I heard a knock on the door. I looked out the window and it was a police officer, and I asked him, how can I help him? And he said, do Willie Timothy Donald stay here? And I said, that's me. So he asked me, he needed me at the police station because he said I had some outstanding traffic tickets. So I stepped out the house and it was like probably about 40, 50 police cars. I'm probably exaggerating. It probably was 10, 15 police cars. So I knew that one. I was thinking to myself that it took all these officers for a traffic ticket. So I was taken to the police station. I was taken to the investigation office, and he told me that I was identified by 2 victims for a robbery, another robbery, and a murder. And in June of that year, I went to trial and I was found guilty of the 2 robberies and the murder, and I was sentenced to 60 years in prison. And I filed numerous appeals and they was denied. So one night, it was in 2006, I wasn't sleeping real well. I decided to look at a TV show, and it was a guy in Texas. He was on death row. He sent some letters to Innocent Project, and they began working on his case. And after years of investigating his case, he was finally released and exonerated from the crime. So I decided to pen a letter, and I told him about the events and the crime. And events will happen on February 27th. And I sent one letter. I sent the letters out to all the Innocent Projects, and I sent them out to about 20 Innocent Projects around the United States. And they most of them was telling me that my case sounded interesting, but they didn't have the resources to reach me. By this time, Medill Innocent Project had got in touch with me, and they said they wanted to take on my case. And that was in 2007. And they began working on my case. Evidence started to come up to prove I was innocent of the crime. And then 2016, I was exonerated.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the things, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's one thing to tell the story, and it's another thing to have lived the story, you know? So it's not lost on us that the trauma and the injury here is great. And I so love and am impressed so much that, you know, there's 2 different ways you could have went, right? You could have, well, there's 3 different ways you could have went. You could have said, I'm never gonna get out of here. They're never gonna believe me. And that's it, you know, and just kind of like surrender to that. The second is what you did, which was, you know, fight for yourself and continue to fight for yourself no matter what, and not give up. And you knew the conviction of your heart, right? And the conviction of the criminal justice system was wrong. They got it wrong, right? So the second option is what you did, which was fight for yourself. Now the third part of this is you could also be real, like, resentful because you're innocent, right? So you were harmed. You were wrongfully accused and you were harmed. And that makes you mad. and you get upset, you get angry, and you could it really can have like deleterious outcomes, and it could have like psychological outcomes, depression, anxiety, like that, right? And so many people who have been incarcerated, and so many people who have been wrongfully accused and wrongfully convicted, if they can turn their life around and take their experience and bring hope to others, then that's amazing, right? And you could have gone the other way. Like, you could have just gotten mad, angry, and you would have been righteous anger. There's nothing worse than righteous anger, right? But you didn't do that. Instead, you made your life into now service for others and to provide hope for others. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like once you were exonerated, and then back in society? Here you are, and then you meet up with Dr. Jackson, and so give us that bird's eye view of what it was like after exoneration.
So it was actually, I thought I was just going back when my case got overturned. Actually, I just thought I was going back for a hearing, and I found out that I was being released, exonerated, and it hit me real hard because I didn't know what to expect. I haven't been out into society in 24 years, and when I finally got out there, it was like this being placed in a foreign country and you didn't know the language out of custom. So I had to realign myself with how to survive in society. And I had a couple of incidents that I'd like to share with you. When I had went to my sister, my sister, my brother-in-law, myself had went to a doctor office, and they had a Keurig machine, and I was trying to make some coffee, so I didn't know how to work the machine. So I tried to pull the cap off to dump the coffee grains into a cup. And
Yeah.
my brother-in-law smiled, and he came over there and helped me and told me and showed me how to work the Keurig machine. So I was just out of touch with society, so I didn't know how to work the machine.
Right.
And another time I was trying to catch the bus to go downtown. I think I was trying to get my driver's license. And I didn't know where to put the money in the machine at. So what I did, not to look dumb in front of people, what I did was I stepped to the side, let people go in front of me and see how they put the money in the machine. And I put the money, and that's how I put the money in the machine. And now, like I was telling Dr. Jackson, and I said now, when I go into public places like filling station, Walmart, I find a camera and stand in front of the camera. So people know where I was at all times. Because my defense attorney says my case, if my crime would have happened in today's time, I would have never got convicted because of the technology, the cell phones, and things of that nature.
Right.
Yeah. So
So then, Timmy, so now how do you meet Dr. Jackson?
I got
Tell us that story.
I got a call from my attorney, Thomas Vangs, and he said Dr. Nickie Jackson would like to meet you. And I said, doctor, I'm thinking, I said, I already had a physical already. He said, no, she's he said, no, she's in education. And he was telling me, he'd give me her background. He said, he'd like to meet you. So I think Dr. Jackson called me, I text me something. She said she wanted to meet at this, the Wheel. Actually, it's located down the street from my office. And we met there. And Dr. Jackson tell a story, and she correct when she tell a story. I never looked at her in her face when we had our discussion. My brother-in-law did most of the talking because he went with me to meet Dr. Jackson, and he did most of the talking. Dr. Jackson asked me how I was doing, asked me how can she help. She asked me did Indiana have a compensation bill, and I said they did not, and she was like, we're gonna work on that. And actually in my head, I'm thinking, I don't want to say crazy, but I said I don't think that's gonna happen. But and she promised me a lot of things, and most of the things she promised me came true. So I appreciate that. And actually I think it was 2019, Dr. Jackson was instrumental in getting a compensation bill passed in Indiana.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, can I just back up a little bit? Can I
Please.
just back
Please.
up a little? Just, sorry about my voice. I'm really embarrassed by my voice. But what's very interesting in Mr. Donald's case is that he really didn't even know that he was going home. Can you imagine? You've been in prison for 24 years. He thought he was being sent to the jail, and his attorney told me he didn't want to go back to jail because jail was really not as comfortable, because he'd be laying on a concrete floor. And Mr. Vane said he didn't even want to come back to the jail to go to his hearing the next day. And Mr. Vanes told Mr. Donald, you need to come, you have to come to the jail. And he just didn't want to go. But eventually Mr. Donald, went to the jail, and he thought that he was going to be just going to have another hearing. And so he was completely surprised that he was being let go that very day. He had no idea that he was walking out of that jail on that particular day.
Wow. So there's
Yeah.
and so what does that say? I mean, and how does that translate? Does that translate to you as they're not even aware? Like, so the system is not even aware of the trauma that's been created against someone like Timmy, and now, like, this is a happy occasion that you should be notified about this, that you're going to be free.
No,
No,
that's
actually,
Timmy, tell a story about your mother's lottery ticket, because I
okay.
think that's going to really resonate with everyone.
Okay. I want to beg back a few though. Actually, the judge was irate because I supposed to have got out that day. When I arrived to the jail, I supposed to have been released that day, but she said the prison was didn't have the paperwork in order, and that's why I had to get released the next day. I wanted to clear that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you didn't know that you were actually
Uh-uh.
leaving. Yeah,
Uh-uh.
just
Yeah.
for clarity,
Yeah.
you
Right.
did not know that you were leaving the correctional system.
And-
His mother had bought a lottery ticket, and Timmy, you tell the story.
So my
Yeah.
mother came and visited me a couple of weeks before I was released, and she told me she played the Powerball, and she said she was gonna win the Powerball. She was gonna get me out of prison because I don't deserve to be in there. So when I found out, I called my mother. I usually call my mother on a Monday, and my mother told me we won. I'm thinking she was talking about the Powerball. I said, "Mama, you won the Powerball." She was like, "No, you won your case." So I thought
Wow.
that was
Yeah. So that's hitting better than hitting.
that's
That's
probably was
better
better than the
than
Powerball to
It's
my
better
mother
than that,
and
right?
myself.
But what I guess what I really want to go back to is this, like, there's an assumption that, well, you're in prison, you're here, you're incarcerated, you're there because you deserve to be there, is maybe the philosophy or the thought. And now you win the case and you're going to be released and nobody even tells you. So what is that? If we read between the lines on that, what does that mean about how we feel or treat those who are incarcerated?
Well, there's just no value. There's no value to the individual. I mean, after Mr. Donald and I, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but after I started receiving letters from people, inmates all over the country, every letter represented an actual person. So I'm always talking about the human capital. Mr. Donald is not a case number. He's a human being. And to be treated as a number is absolutely, it's egregious. It's egregious. And the way he was treated was so unfair. And I've always said this, I am a victimologist. He was re-victimized. You know, they didn't even apologize to him. There was nothing. It was grab the stuff that you had. And Timmy, you can share the story about how you had to go, or whether you went back and got all of your belongings because you didn't even know you were going to be released.
Yeah.
Did you go back and get all of your things?
Yeah, I was trying to give them to some guys I knew, and they said, no, you can't do that. That's against prison policy. You have to come back and get it. So I had to come back and get my commissary, my TV. So when I didn't want to go back there, but they insisted that I had to come back and get them things.
Wow. Wow. And so tell me about your job now and your position. Talk a little bit, if you can, about the organization and what the organization does and what your role and position is.
Before he does that, I just want to clarify something. The
Sure.
Willie T. Donald Exoneration Advisory Coalition is what we started right away. We now have the Center for Justice and Post Exoneration Assistance, which we created almost 3 years ago, 3 years ago in March. So we, the center we call it CJPA. That is where Timmy is right now. And so it's the coalition was started to help people who've been wrongly convicted, to give them post-exoneration assistance. But now we have developed a center since the People magazine came out. Kim Kardashian zoomed into my class. So after these things happened, you know, I knew that I couldn't do this on my own. I went to Timmy and I said, you know, I want to start an organization, an actual center. And the university, Purdue Northwest, and Steve Simon, the owner of the Indiana Pacers, who's a good friend to Timmy and myself, together they funded us to do a startup. So
Wow.
the work we're doing now is through the Center for Justice and Post Exoneration Assistance at Purdue University Northwest, CJPA.
Wow. Great. And who is funding?
So the Purdue University Northwest, our chancellor, our former chancellor, our current chancellor, are very supportive of the work that we're doing. And Steve Simon, who owns the Indiana Pacers, and Simon Malls, like every mall you go to, Simon Equities. Mr. Simon reached out to me in 2020, heard about the work I was doing here in Indiana after, as Mr. Donald told you a little bit at the beginning, that I had been working on a compensation bill. And I'm very proud to say we got the bill created and passed. There are flaws with the bill. Would like to see some changes, some modifications, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen anytime soon. But after Steve Simon got involved, we and the university said we're going to we'll give you funding to do this, a startup for 2 years. Our money has run out through them, but they both gifted us again, even when the money was over. So that was really nice. But anyway, when we started this, I'm the executive director, and Timmy is the project manager of our center. And Timmy can share what he does.
Yes, please. We want to hear, Timmy, what you do, what your position is, and the kind of job that you're doing.
Okay. So when CJPA received letters from clients that claim they are wrongly convicted of the crimes they've been sentenced to, I get the letter. Sometimes I Google their case. I Google their appeals, and the appeals will get you a slight summary of the case. I read the summary. I write my own summary. I file it in our file cabinet. We got an Excel sheet. I file the name in the Excel sheet, and I work closely with Dr. Jackson students in her wrongful conviction class. They'll usually come to the center, and they'll put their eyes on the case too, and we just go from there.
So the process is, once we get a case, Mr. Donald's job is to, as he's already told you, is to review the case. And then if he thinks there's something in the case where there may be evidence of factual innocence, we only work on factual innocence cases. Then what he'll do is he'll work with the students, and they will, put together really a summary, and then they'll present it to me. And then we talk about whether this is a case that we should be further investigating. We are not lawyers. I'm a PhD, not a lawyer. So we have board members who are attorneys, and they have been very helpful. We can't discuss a case we're working on, but what I can share with you is for the past 2.5 years, I can't tell you new developments, but what I can tell you is we've got a client that we have been working this case very hard. Students, many semesters have been working on it. He was convicted of 5 homicides, received 300 years. And we know there's DNA in this case, and we know the DNA belongs to a police officer's son. Our client's DNA is nowhere on any of the victims' bodies, anywhere in a house, in a car. His fingerprints aren't there. So I've gone with the attorney to the prison to go and really to meet with the client. One of the things that I'm really mindful with is that I don't ask Mr. Donald to go back to the prison because it's not something he's comfortable with. So we're really careful with what when I say me, what I have Mr. Donald working on. So his primary role is to work with the students, looking at the cases. And the other piece that Mr. Donald has worked on is we received a grant to conduct police trainings. Mr. Donald had heard about police trainings, and he reached out to me and he said, this is something I think we should do. I did some research, and he and I went to the Illinois State Police Academy. We did a Zoom, we watched their training, and we've modified it. But we've done 6 police trainings. When we did the Gary Police Department training, Mr. Donald, I did not even ask him. I didn't take him. I took another exoneree because I didn't want Mr. Donald there. And what was interesting in that training is the officers who were sitting there said, "Oh, he works for you." That's the case that we've modeled, ourselves after, like things that the officer, Detective Outlaw, who had arrested Mr. Donald and conducted the investigation. And I didn't make that name up. His name is really Detective Outlaw. And said that, I just learned that a few years ago. But anyway, they said, we now, know what not to do with what Outlaw did. So they used Timmy's case as a model of what not to do, which is pretty incredible.
Very, very.
So we've been doing a lot of educational pieces, and Mr. Donald shares his story with the community. And as you can imagine, we've done a lot of podcasts. We've done a TV show on his case. It's not easy for him to relive this. And I appreciate every time he speaks to people. And I know he's doing it because he wants to prevent this from happening to anybody else.
Yes, I love that you're doing this, the training with the police department. That's
It's
phenomenal.
been great. Yeah, we give them a pre-test and a post-test. And Mr. Donald and I, we have a colleague who actually does the data analysis. And what's interesting is that for all the police departments that we've done 6, and we'll continue to do more when we get more funding. We found that they pretty much failed the pre-test. And we have in our training, we have the chief to the patrol officers. That's why I didn't want to do the academy. I didn't want it to just be the rookies coming in. I want it to be the seasoned detectives. I want them to hear, best practices of how they can, go out there and investigate a case, interrogate somebody. And, I do believe we've been very successful. Our chiefs of police have been very, very kind and have shared that this was a very meaningful presentation, and that things, that they would make some changes in their department. And that is our goal, is to educate. And we've explained that we're not there to blame, because I know some of the chiefs were like, are you going to come in and yell at my officers and blame them? And we're not there to blame. We're not here to blame anybody. We just want people to be informed, educated, and we don't want this. I don't want this to ever happen to anybody else.
Right.
And Timmy lost 24. I mean, he was 22 when he went into prison, and he was a 46-year-old man. I mean, just when you hear that, you hear 24 years and you're like, wow. But when you hear 22 years old and coming out at 46, it's hard for us to wrap our head around that, right? I mean,
Yes.
for me, it's very hard to wrap my head around that.
And so Timmy, what being incarcerated for 24 years, how did that change you? What's the culture like there? I mean, our students hear about this and they read about it in the textbooks, and they, and they hear the lectures from their professors, but who better than you to tell them what the experience is like incarcerated?
Oh, well, prison, they got their own set of rules, like society got. It's older gentlemen in prison. They used to take you to the side and explain the rules to you, and it'd be in your best interest to follow the rules. If you don't, it can be consequences behind you not following the rules. And you had it's difficult to explain because you got the prison rules, you got the facility rules, and you got your values. I was taught by my parents, my mother rather, and you got to maneuver your way through them through the three, and
Yeah.
it's sometimes difficult to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. And with,
And so one of the questions that, I've asked Timmy to talk about with students and others is, what was it like to not only be in prison, but to know that you're innocent and be in prison? Timmy, will you share with everyone what you shared with me about telling people? Did you tell people you didn't commit these crimes?
The first individual I told I was innocent in prison, he laughed in my face. So I never told nobody else that I was innocent. So that hurt me deeply that he laughed in my face when I told him I was an innocent man.
Mm. So not being believed from the very beginning all the way till, practically, and even now you're saying that there's litigation, which is indicative that someone's not believing. And when we don't feel believed, when we don't feel valued, when we feel diminished and pushed to the margins, that could be so disempowering and so traumatic. We talk about trauma informed. Everything today is really informed by the trauma that we've experienced. But you've experienced trauma, 24 years of trauma, and being re-traumatized. And I would imagine that every time someone asks you this question, and I apologize for asking the question,
That's okay.
you kind of have to relive it, and it's again, re-traumatizing. And I'm sure that there's still going to be people who are going to hear the story and then are going to be like, well, I don't know if I believe that or not, but I believe you.
Well, I think people believe his story. I have to tell you, I think even the attorneys believe he was wronged. I don't think there's really any question about Timmy's innocence. There's evidence that, we have evidence that he didn't commit these crimes. And there's evidence that points to a different perpetrator who is now deceased. A victim, who identified Timmy, and I guess we didn't share that.
We didn't go all through the evidence.
Right. So, the bottom line is Timmy was misidentified. And when the students who were working his case at Northwestern University, they were undergraduate students, like some of your students, some of my students, they were undergraduate students, and they started, working on this case. And Timmy has shared that when the students came to the prison, he looked at them and was like, oh man, I'm never getting out of here, because they were just these young kids, right? But these kids did an amazing job. They went back and talked to witnesses, and they found a witness. There were two witnesses who were placed in a room together. Remember, he said there were 5 armed robberies. There were multiple victims. One was a former police officer. One was a retired Gary police officer who said it wasn't Timmy, right? She didn't identify him. Nobody had identified him. But what had happened, and I'll share this part, Timmy, okay? Let me do this piece for you. They put these 2 victims from 2 different robberies in the same room. They put the 6-pack in front of them. And remember, Timmy's picture was taken during that 1989, when they brought him in for that alleged stolen vehicle, which it wasn't stolen, but that picture never was removed, right? So this detective who was working the case, I'm not sure which one, but they were putting the pictures in front of these 2 women, and Timmy's picture just kind of kept getting creeped up on them. And one woman said, well, it could have been him. The other's like, yeah, I don't think so. And it went back and forth. And eventually they both said, yeah, that's him. Okay. So then when they did the physical lineup, as you know, we explain it to our students in class, when you're doing a physical lineup, what they're often, picking out is the photo that they saw, not the individual who actually robbed them. But these students, years and years later, they found one of the 2 women, and she was now living in Florida. And Miss Fleming said, I knew it wasn't him all this time. She's felt like this burden, this heavy, people don't think about how she's been victimized, this heavy burden that they have the wrong man sitting in prison, and nobody has talked to her. Nobody has asked her any questions. And so when she said that she was pretty much coerced to pick him out, that's when this case really started, it started evolving.
Wow.
Then we find out that Timmy, I don't know if you want to share the story about Miss Fleming and her sighting of the robber a few days later. Do you want to tell that?
Well, Miss Fleming has seen the actual perpetrator walk past her house, and she immediately called the police and said the perpetrator had just walked past her house. So the police came out to her residence, and they got the information from her. Then they went to I was working at a department store at the time. They went to the department store and talked to my supervisor and viewed the time cards, and seeing that I was at work during the sighting when she seen the actual perpetrator. And that was never disclosed to my attorney before my trial. That was the first time they withhold evidence. They did it a second time too.
Well, why don't you talk about the second time?
The second time, the Miss Fleming said she didn't think I was the individual that robbed her. It was a conference call she had with the prosecutor, and it was a couple months before my trial, and that information was withheld from my attorney also.
So you can see how frustrating this is. People knew that he wasn't the guy. In fact, all the victims who were there at the different crime scenes, all of them reported that the man who robbed them, the assailant, had acne, pockmarked skin, very dark, didn't resemble Mr. Donald. And I always say this, if you look at his skin today, even after having been incarcerated for 24 years, it's smooth. It's smooth. Even when you look at his mugshot, his skin did not resemble anything. His build didn't resemble nothing resembled other than he was a young black man. That was the only trait that, those were the only traits.
That's what Miss Fleming pointed out in a note that they found in the prosecutor. She said that I had my shoulders was wider than the actual perpetrator. That was in her notes that they withheld from our attorney.
Yeah, so the students found those notes in a file, just so everybody understands that. they found him. And the other thing that we didn't share, there's so much about his case, and anybody can watch it on, you know, you can stream it on Discover ID. It's on People Magazine Investigates. The episode is called Alibi, and you can actually, they have footage of you know, of everything from, you know, the beginning to the end. So you can actually see what happened in this particular case. It's so egregious that I think it's hard for people to understand that this really could happen. This wasn't, you know, oh, the victims thought that this was him. They knew it wasn't him from the
Right.
beginning.
Okay.
I
Timmy?
would, I thought was interesting too that this was known. Well, I thought was interesting too that the police had the police in the case, he had got a search warrant signed and every search warrant signed by the judge before the actual lineup was conducted. The witness identified me in the lineup. That was the probable cause to get the search warrant signed. The search warrant was signed after. No, it was signed before they viewed it. It was signed before they viewed the lineup.
Yeah, so there was a search warrant issued before the physical lineup. So how in the world did that happen?
Yeah. So guys, listen, this is such a rich conversation. And we could probably go for a long, long time, but I did promise both of you that I'd have you done by 8. So it's 7:46 now, your time, 6:46. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to the Q&A if that's all right. And then we'll come back for last words if that's okay. And it looks like we have 3. But before, actually, I just want to make one tiny little comment before we go to the questions. And that is, just the other day, the Nebraska Supreme Court ruled that convicted felons who serve their sentences are now allowed to vote after the state's top election officials sought to keep them from casting ballots ahead of the November 5th election. And Nebraska has historically restored the voting rights of former felons 2 years after they completed the terms of their sentences. Did you want to talk about this at all? This is kind of in your wheelhouse a little bit. Dr. Jackson?
It's not really what we really don't work in the space of, it's interesting because we try to stay in our lane, which is really working with people who've been wrongly convicted. I know people think, well, we're out there working with people who've been released from prison. And so this whole voting thing, it's important. And we believe that, at least I do, that if you've been released from prison, you should be able to vote. You've done your time, right? But we really don't get into those issues at our center. I mean, the things that we focus on is really education. We talk about legislation. We work on post exoneration assistance, and we work on investigating claims of innocence. That's really, we try to stay in our lane.
Okay, that's good.
So I think going to the questions would be fabulous.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to remove your spotlight. And was I going to have any of my project managers come on, or I want to give you guys the opportunity to get some FaceTime? Annie, you wanna? Annie,
Yep, right here.
Camera? There you are. All right, take it away. Annie is one of our amazing production team members. She's a project manager for us. She's in the College of Psychology and a graduating senior. Yes.
I'm excited to be graduating.
Yes. So go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to thank you again, both of you, for coming on today. And then also, of course, just like really for taking the time to share your story yet again. So from Ty Baker in the chat, we had, he has 2 questions. So the first one was, Timmy, what kept you going while serving those 24 years? So many people in your situation lose so much faith or even lose themselves. That's the first question.
Yeah.
The power of innocence. You were innocent of the crime that you were sentenced to, and that's what kept, for 24 years, that's what kept me going. Through all the dark nights and dark days, the power of innocence, the one that kept my heart beating.
The power of innocence. That sounds like another maybe documentary that we could do for you.
Yeah,
Awesome.
no, it
Another,
definitely does.
yeah. Second question.
Yeah, so the second question is for Dr. Jackson. So then Ty also said that they graduated top of their class with a degree in criminal justice and have been following the Innocence Project on Instagram. So it's a dream for them to be able to work for the Innocence Project. So they wanted to ask if you have any suggestions or advice on how they can be a part of the Innocence Project or volunteer their time, because they'd really like to do something to help.
Okay, so the Innocence Project is different. It's like a franchise. It's like, you know, McDonald's and Burger King. They're all different in every state. And so my advice is to reach out to your local either Innocence Project or like our Center for Justice or a wrongful conviction clinic. We're not part of the Innocence Project, but reach out and ask what you can do. My students have an advantage because we have a center right on campus, and so they have to be interviewed. I mean, we don't take anybody. But they, you know, they have worked with us. In fact, my daughter went to University of Michigan. So I had a group of students from Michigan during COVID. Parents were saying our kids were like, you know, they're losing their minds. So I started a national student task force, and Mr. Donald got to work with some of these students too at different universities. And I'm happy to say that they have, you know, they've gotten into law school, they've gotten jobs, they've done really well. So just reach out, do your research and find out, you know, what organizations work in this area. And if you don't have an Innocence Project or a center like ours, reach out to your public defender's office and see if they have an opportunity for you to do some volunteer work there.
Excellent. And Annie, was there anything else from that participant, or did you want to go to the next one to Dominique?
That was the last one from that participant. So the next one, yeah, is from Dominique. So this is also to you, Dr. Jackson. So they asked, how do you designate which law enforcement agencies to work with?
It's a great question. So what we do in Indiana, the two counties that have the highest rates of wrongful conviction and exonerations, we don't even know what the rate is for the wrongful convictions, but the exonerations is Lake County, which is where the university is housed, and Elkhart County. So I applied for a grant at Lake County with Legacy Foundation, which is, you know, which gives money out to Lake County, you know, organizations. So I picked 6 police departments in Lake County, and I picked some of the departments that had the highest numbers of exonerations, but I also picked departments that didn't, you know, because I wanted it to really be well-rounded. And I think it was. We picked, you know, upper class communities and lower class communities, just kind of went across the board. But we really wanted to start in Lake County, and the governor was very impressed with the work that we were doing, and invited me to come meet with him at his home. And, you know, he said we should be doing this everywhere. And I said, we should, but we need the money to do that. And right now we do have a company who is very interested in funding us. I haven't even told Mr. Donald this yet, but I've been working with them, and we're hoping that we'll be able to do this training throughout the state of Indiana because it's very important. But we also need to work with prosecutors. I think they're going to be the tougher, you know, sell than the police. And keep in mind, and what I always say to my students in my wrongful conviction class, you know, we always talk about the police. It's always the police, but it's the prosecutor who really makes the decision of whether to indict somebody, right? So they have to do their due diligence. And in Mr. Donald's case, the prosecutor did not, in my opinion. You know, he knew there was he had to know there was information in these files. And if he didn't know, he didn't do his due diligence. That, you know, Miss Fleming had called and said the perpetrator was outside of her home. So, in fact, the prosecutor offered Mr. Donald an opportunity to get out of prison 3 years before he was exonerated, because he knew that Mr. Donald didn't commit these crimes. And the prosecutor is a very good friend of mine. He was at my wedding 29 years ago, 28 years ago, however long ago it was that I was married. And we've been friends for a long time. And he's African American and, I think a really good man. But then when I found out that he, because I called him and I said, is Mr. Donald, is he getting out on a procedural error? Is he factually innocent? And he said, no, we got the wrong guy. That's how I ended up reaching out to Mr. Donald when I heard the prosecutor say, we got the wrong guy. But then I was like, you knew for 3 years that you had the wrong guy and you let him sit in prison. And Mr. Donald, when they offered him the opportunity to get out, he declined. He said, no, I'm not getting out under these conditions because I didn't do it. And you called my mama a liar and my sister a liar. They didn't lie. And I'm not coming out till everybody knows I'm an innocent man. And he spent 3 more years in prison. He didn't even know if he was going to get out. I don't know if I have that kind of strength, but as he told you, the power of innocence, he really held on to that power of innocence, that someday he was going to be free. But I always say freedom is never free. He's still not free. I'll share a quick story with you that I just shared. We did a big presentation a few weeks ago and I shared the story and I think it's really powerful. A year or two ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I got a call on a Saturday morning from Mr. Donald, who normally texts me. And it was early and I was like, hey, what's up? And he said, did you see the Chicago news? And I said, yeah. And he goes, there was a bank robbery. I said, yeah, I saw it. I saw that. And I said, yeah, what's the deal? And he's like, I just want you to know where I was last night. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because in my world, my brain doesn't think about that. I see the news and I'm like, oh, there was a bank robbery, right? And a police officer who was serving as security guard at that bank was killed. So Mr. Donald said, I want you to know where I was, and I'm going to send you a copy of the receipt of this fast food restaurant. And I started crying on the phone, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to be fine. And it hit me, he is never going to be free. And then he later tells me that he has saved every receipt from everywhere he goes. And I find out all these exonerees I know are doing that. They're saving receipts from places that they go shopping, restaurants. I mean, one exoneree told me he has just bags of receipts. Can you imagine living your life like that? Because I sure can't. So don't think because people have been free from prison that they are really free. They are always watching their backs, their surroundings. And Mr. Donald will tell you that he knows I will answer anytime he calls. I answer the phone. And I do want to say one thing, Timmy. You said I made a lot of promises to you and I've kept most of them. I want to know which ones I haven't kept. So we're going to have to talk about that later.
Afterward, we'll talk about that. That's funny. Yeah, I thought of that too when
he said most. I was like,
oh,
what happened, Timmy? What happened?
I misspoke. She kept all her
okay.
promises to me.
It's okay. Cameron, here's my other production team project manager. Are you gonna share with us Dave Blair and Ebony Brown's questions?
Yes, I will do that right now.
Great.
Okay, this one is for Timmy. Sorry, give me a second.
Okay.
What was the hardest? Sorry?
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. What was the hardest part for you, Timmy, re-entering society after being in prison so long?
This trust in people. Because I lost a lot of trust in people during my ordeal. So it was just trying to rebuild faith and trust in people. And, there's certain people you can trust and there's certain people. Dr. Jackson is a person I can trust. And it's a lot of paranoia because I've been traumatized. So it's a lot of, I deal with a lot of paranoia. I drive to work. I don't take I take different routes home. I don't take the same route. It just, when the police get after me, I get nervous and it's just a lot of paranoia. So it didn't get easier some, but it's still traumatizing.
Yeah. Okay, we got two more questions and then we're going to close down the Q&A in the webinar. Well, go ahead, Cam.
Okay. The next question is from Ebony. She said, "Thank you you both for taking the time to speak with us today. Timmy, your story is so compelling and powerful. I'm a detective for the Police Department of New York State with 19 years of experience. What advice would you give to fellow detectives?"
Well, Dr. Jackson and I always, during our police training, we always emphasize the fact that don't have tunnel vision. You know, just don't have tunnel vision. Just, just look at everything as a whole, and just don't center yourself on one individual. Just look over the entire evidence, and just don't have tunnel vision.
Okay, thank you, Timmy. And last one from Christopher. Go ahead, Cam.
All right. This one says, "For the training sessions that you now provide to law enforcement agencies, what do you think is the most important aspect to convey during your training to law enforcement to ensure that the wrongdoings to Timmy and others don't happen again?"
I think that's a great question. I think one of the most important things is to let them know that, it's not about clearing a crime, right? I think police are very interested in clearing a crime because when you've got the wrong person, the right person is still walking the streets. So, and Mr. Donald just said it very well. You really have to look at all of the facts of the case and don't center yourself on one individual, and understand that what you are doing impacts not just one person, but many other lives. I mean, Timmy's family lost him for 24 years. I mean, they were also prisoners. It cost them a lot of money. It cost them time. Timmy's father died while he was incarcerated. So understand how much power you have. And, when you do lineups, one of the things that we always talk about when you're doing a lineup for the police officer, the detective who's on here right now, do a double-blind administration. Make sure that the person who is administering the lineup is not the detective who's investigating the case. You don't want to have any biases. So make sure that is somebody who's unfamiliar with the suspect, who engages in the lineup. And I mean, we could be here for days. We talk about interrogations, what to do during an interrogation, what not to do. We obviously talk about lineups. There's a lot of things that we talk about during the training, and the chiefs of police have been, very receptive and said it's been very helpful. And these are things that they haven't been trained during the academy, and I wish they would be, because I think things could change.
Yes, yes. And we have one final question, and that's located in the YouTube chat. And it basically is asking, was the only evidence in your case, and this is Tom Gainey, one of our PhD students, but the question is, was there any other evidence besides the eyewitness identification?
Nothing.
And we know that that's like the number one in wrongful convictions. Eyewitness identification is like the number one misstep. So
there was the search warrant revealed nothing. They found nothing.
Wow.
So
Just
no, the
wow,
only
really.
thing was 2 people testified that it was Mr. Donald, and he spent 24 years in prison.
Yeah.
So mistaken witness identification, that was it.
Just think, I got paid on that day so what would be my motive to go rob somebody? I had just got paid.
Yeah.
So
Timmy, thank you so much for being here.
I thank you for having me.
I don't represent all law enforcement, and I don't pretend to do that. But having been 20 years NYPD, retired at the rank of lieutenant, and was very much involved in training and taught at the police academy for many, many years. I just want to tell you how sorry I am, like, that this happened, because this should not have ever happened. And you're resilient. You're re-entering successfully. You're moving and shaking, and you're doing good stuff, good work, great work. And your relationship and how much you both admire each other is just really comes right off of the screen here. I mean, it's just I'm so impressed by it, and how blessed are you that you get to do this kind of work now? That's a blessing, and I'm sure you're grateful for it. But there's nothing that can give you back what you lost. There's that trauma that happened to you, that victimization that happened to you. There's nothing that can really erase it. But what you can do is take your experience, which you are, and giving others hope by your work. So I applaud you for everything, for all of it. I'm sorry you had to go through it, but like all of us who probably, if you asked each person that's watching tonight, if they've ever had a traumatizing issue happen, or any kind of trauma happen to them, any kind of injury happen to them, any harm happen to them, they'd probably say, yeah, at some point, right? It has. But the beauty is taking that harm, taking that trauma and turning it into a gift.
Right.
And you're making that a gift now for others, providing hope and doing some really great work. So keep it up. Proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. Really amazing. And Dr. Jackson, thank you for your work and how much you care about Timmy and how much you care about your work and all of the exonerees is absolutely 100% evident. And I thank you for being here tonight, despite the laryngitis, and you did a great job.
Thank you.
You did excellent.
Thank
You just sound a little like Brenda Vaccaro, but like I'm dating myself.
You
when
know,
I
now that you
that.
say that, I can hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. So see, some people know who Brenda Vaccaro
I
is.
know who she is, of course.
Okay,
Of
so you
course.
guys get the last word. So Dr. Jackson, you get like a brief, because it's 8:06. So just like closing remark, and then Timmy gets the final word. We'll talk about after that. I'll come on. You guys can shut your cameras off, and I'll come on and talk a little bit about what's next and who else do we have this month.
Okay,
So
well, first,
Nickie.
I also want to echo what Timmy said, and thank you for having us on. We really enjoy sharing the work that we do and giving us a platform to share the work that we're doing. Just, I guess at the end, people always say to me, Timmy is so lucky that you read this article about him and you reached out to his attorney. And I have to tell you, it's really me who's lucky because he welcomed me into his world. And so have so many exonerees. It is an honor to actually, know these individuals. And as you can just see from Timmy, they're all like this. They're so humble, and their integrity is something that I can't even, I just can't reach to that level, I don't think. So I am very humbled and I'm honored to know them. And I'm really proud that they call me a friend and that they can trust me. And for the students out there, no, when I was a college student, I never thought this is where I was going to land in my work. My background is working with domestic violence victims and sexual assault victims. But when I met Timmy, what I recognized is that there were similarities between exonerees, their victimization, and DV victims. And I was like, wow, I can really extend the work I've done, the research, and bringing it into this space. So just know you may land somewhere where you don't expect to land, because I surely did not expect to land here. But anyway, I'm very grateful. So thank you, Timmy.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
I want to thank y'all for having me on the show tonight. And I'd like to personally thank Dr. Jackson for doing what she do and try to she's definitely had made my life a little bit easier. So I appreciate her making my life easier. And for everybody that's listening, watching, if you can get involved in some type of to get bills paid to try to eliminate wrongful conviction, that'll be a good avenue for you to go down. And if you want to get into this space of wrongful conviction, you're more than welcome. And I think it'll be beneficial to you if you decide to go that route.
Are you talking about legislation, bills being passed?
Legislation bills, yeah.
Legislation. Yep, absolutely. Great. Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Timmy.
Thank you.
Jackson. Thank
Thank
you.
you for having
Thank
me.
you. Thank you. Bless you both.
Thank you.
So we have very exciting show for you next Thursday also, and it is Recovery Unplugged. And so I'm going to highlight Richie Supa, who is has written many songs for various famous bands, one of them being Aerosmith, and he was part of their music for a while. And he's going to talk about his journey and his experience with addiction, and how he took that issue, that trauma that he experienced, and the disease of addiction that he lives with, and he's in recovery and clean and really productive member of society now, and is responsible for really beginning and starting Recovery Unplugged. So I have Dr. Barry Ryman is going to be on, and he's going to also talk a little bit about Recovery Unplugged and what it is. And Richie Supa is going to talk a little bit about addiction. I cannot wait for next Thursday. And then just to kind of like end it all, when we talk about ending October, we're ending it with Halloween, October 31st. And who's my guest? Unfound Ed Denzel. And I think he said he was going to wear a mask or something. I don't know. He was going to surprise us. We'll see. But anyway, thank you so much. Thank you to Dean Durham. Thank you to Dean Kushner, Dr. Castro, all of the administration for all of their support. I want to thank Ansouvé Jean-Louis. I want to thank Cameron Brown and Eddie Hammonds, my production team, my amazing students. And we'll see you soon. We'll see you next week. And we are now off the air. Yes.